Hello, everyone. The name of my study is Effects of the Picture Exchange Communication System, or PECS, Phase 3 Protocol on Improving Picture Discrimination. So, PECS is an augmentative and alternative communication modality based on the principles outlined in B.F. Skinner's verbal behavior. It's one of the most widely used systems for teaching people with autism and developmental disabilities to communicate, but interestingly, there actually is not a lot of research as to its effectiveness. So, the National Standards Project, which is a meta analysis conducted by the National Autism Center, classifies PECS as emerging, which is a step below the highest level of research, which is an established treatment. So, PECS, excuse me, is an emerging treatment. So, not surprisingly, there haven't been a lot of studies that have looked more specifically at the PECS Phase 3 protocol, which targets picture discrimination. When I did my literature review, there was one study that I found that indicated the effectiveness of a modified PECS Phase 3 protocol. There was another study that looked at PECS Phase 3 protocols effects on speech production, but none that I found that looked specifically just at adherence to the strict protocol of the picture discrimination phase. So my subject was an 8-month-old girl with an educational classification of multiply disabled. She attends the ABA program at the public school that I work at, and she's in a classroom with 4 other students, 5 assistant teachers, a classroom teacher, so she receives one-to-one support at all times throughout the day. She has a pretty complex medical history, which includes global developmental delays, strabismus, which is a visual condition that affects depth perception and navigation. She's had surgery on her eyes. She's had chronic conductive hearing loss and multiple surgeries on her ears. And she currently does not have a reliable means of communicating her wants and needs. She has no functional verbal speech at all. She doesn't imitate or produce speech sounds. And in the fall, I actually conducted an AAC evaluation and an AAC trial with her, and found that it was specifically a high-tech AAC trial and evaluation, and found that a speech-generating device was not appropriate for her, due mostly to her motor planning and fine motor deficits. So I determined that a picture exchange modality, such as PECS, is more appropriate, considering her current situation and skill set. So the target behavior was discrimination, which was defined as manually grasping the picture of a known preferred item in a field of 4 pictures, which included 1 known preferred item picture and 3 known non-preferred item pictures. Then removing the picture from the communication book, placing it in the open palm of the communication partner to make a request. The durations of our sessions were 30 minutes. And the placement of a picture of a known preferred item in the hand of the communication partner was recorded as 1 successful opportunity. The same thing for a non-preferred item was an unsuccessful opportunity. Inter-observer agreement and treatment fidelity were also measured and remained at 100% throughout the course of the study. I used a multiple baseline design across behaviors. So the 3 behaviors that I measured and targeted were discriminating between pictures of 3 different preferred items. Before taking the initial baseline data, I did an informal probe to determine which 3 items would be most preferred, and they turned out to be a book, an electronic watch, and chocolate chips. So those were the most determined to be as to have the highest potential reinforcing value. In terms of the procedure itself, the procedure begins with the target preferred item and the subject's communication book with the 4 pictures in the subject's vicinity. As soon as she makes an unintentional body movement in the direction of the communication book or the preferred item, the communication partner I position my hand open, facing up, to signal to her where to put the picture. Then, when she places the picture in my hand, she's given access to the item represented in the picture that she exchanged for. So if she reaches for the picture of the preferred item, she's provided with verbal praise immediately. So like something like, "Oh wow, just to that's part of the protocol. And she places when she places the picture of the preferred item in my hand, she gains access to that item for no longer than 20 seconds. If she handed me a picture of the non-preferred item, she is given access to that item. If she rejects the item, the protocol is as follows. First, I remove all the items from her visual field. Then I place one hand facing upward, covering all the pictures except the preferred item. And then using the other hand, I point to the picture of the preferred item saying, "This is watch, give me watch." Once I receive the picture, I say, "Good, this is watch." At this point, though she does not receive reinforcement or gain access to that item, this is just part of the teaching procedure. Then I give a verbal direction to do an interspersal task or a gross motor task, and then I reintroduce the preferred item and wait for her to initiate another trial. So that's the teaching procedure or the intervention that was used. So the results showed that the procedure was effective at improving picture discrimination for the first two items, so the watch and the book, but it did not improve. There was no improvement seen with the chocolate chips. It was pretty. That data never stabilized, and there are some reasons for that I hypothesize that I'm going to discuss in a second. There was also an upward trend in her success rate discriminating pictures of the book during the intervention phase of the watch, but before the intervention phase of the book. So that is indicative of potentially some generalization that was starting to occur. Some of the limitations of the study. First, during baseline measurement, the subject was provided with natural consequences based on the picture that was exchanged. So, for instance, when she exchanged the picture of one of the preferred items, she gained access to that item during baseline phase. So, although it's not as explicit of a teaching procedure as the PECS protocol that was used, that reinforcement, that natural reinforcement, in a way really does constitute a teaching procedure in and of itself. So the extent to which that natural reinforcement was responsible for learning isn't clear and wasn't controlled for. So future research in that area could compare rates of skill acquisition for this type of natural reinforcement versus implementation of the protocol that I used. Another limitation was the failure to rank or quantify reinforcer value, or in other words, to do a formal preference assessment. I did not do a formal preference assessment. It was more of an informal preference assessment. And there are also some underlying motivational variables that made my study a little bit tricky in some areas. Part of my subject's history and profile is a severely restricted repertoire of reinforcers. She loves videos. She loves a lot of visually stimulating sensory input. She has a strong preference towards that. What happens if she is presented with an item, for instance, such as chocolate chips, and she doesn't want that item? Like the way that my study was set up, she has 4 choices, and if she's not motivated by one of those choices, what does she do? She potentially could select something that looks most like something that she wants, even if it's not available. And I think this is what happened for chocolate chips. I think it turned out that while she was motivated to select chocolate chips during the informal assessment, I don't think she was motivated by it throughout the course of the study. So I think times that she was unsuccessful was more indicative of a lack of motivation than it was a failure of the phase 3 protocol to teach that skill, because she really had demonstrated that skill with these other reinforcers and reinforcers prior that were trained prior to this study. The PECS protocol actually does have a way of addressing this formally, but it really wasn't within the scope of my study or outlined in the protocol of my study. So future investigations could pursue a more detailed and systematic account of preference and implement similar protocols with subjects that have a higher or a bigger, larger repertoire of reinforcers. Another limitation of my study was that my participant did have an extensive history, as I mentioned before, of visual perceptual complications. So although she had demonstrated the ability to discriminate in a lot of different circumstances. The extent to which her visual perceptual differences impacted her ability to discriminate isn't really clear. So, in this area, future research could look at what factors affect successful training of picture discrimination skills with individuals who do and who don't have visual impairments. And then, final limitation of my study, which was a pretty big one, was that I actually did not have time to take maintenance and generalization data, which I obviously wish that I did. I did lose points for that, but that was not done. So obviously, future research should take that into consideration as well. That's it. Thanks.